Alright guys, if your car looks like this video may be for you. We've all been there and we've all seen it. A guy will come over, lay a car down. Hey man, I don't know what's going on with this car. Can you help me out and take a look? I don't even know where to start. This isn't necessarily going to be a speed issue as much as it is making your car easier to work on, cleaner, easier to clean, a little more presentable. You know, for this guy here, it's hard to start with suggesting, weight-saving titanium screws is his problem. A couple different methods to clean this up. It's a mess. I know a lot of people struggle with this. You see a lot of zip ties, a lot of electrical tape, a lot of excess wire, connectors to connectors to connectors to get to a battery. So we're just going to talk about a couple methods to clean your car up a little bit. One of the coolest and probably trickiest things you can do is they sell these little kits so you can cut your wires, make your lead to any length you want, but it's pretty proprietary, meaning you may only be able to run that servo with that car. And if you're like me, I switch cars a lot, I like to tinker a lot, so I typically leave my wires full length. This isn't impossible, but it's definitely advanced, much more advanced than the next thing I'm going to show you. Next thing is just getting kind of creative with a little bit of shrink tubing, a little bit of CA, kind of planning your paths out for your wires, and we'll go from there. So recently I went to an out-of-town race. They had open motor street stock. I've never ran street stock. I didn't own a street stock, but I was intrigued by the open motor aspect, and a buddy of mine got in the hobby a couple of years ago, and he let me borrow his car, and in return I rebuilt it, cleaned it up, getting ready to give it back to him. He's got good electronics, but I felt more comfortable using the brand and electronics I've been racing with for years. So I quickly mounted up some new electronics on a electronics plate there, and was able to do a hard transplant. And now that I'm returning the car back to him, I didn't want to just take the liberty and start cutting his wires and going that route. So you kind of see some old school methods of twisting the wire around a wrench, using a lighter, kind of warming the wire up so it kind of holds shape. The other method I'm talking about is kind of folding up and sneaking some wires down between the speedo and the receiver, covering it in some shrink tubing. It's just if a guy was to come over and hand me a car like this, say, hey man, can you take a look at it? One, it shows, this guy's put some time in his car. Two, he cares about it. Three, it's going to be that much easier to work on. So one way we can do it, I'm going to use a couple old servos here. You got your full length servo wire. Nothing too fancy and elaborate with this. A little bit of shrink tubing. Use a color of your choice. We'll kind of plan out our path on the wires. Wires are nice and flat nowadays. They fold up easy. One trick I do sometimes is I'll come in here with a pair of straight scissors, and we're just going to stretch that shrink tubing out a little bit. Gives it a little more room to work with. I'll do both sides, and then we should be able to tuck these wires inside that if it doesn't fold up on me. Just like so. Now sometimes it's a tight fit, sometimes a little bit of a loose fit like so. So just grab a lighter. Rule here is top part of the flame, yellow part of the flame, that's where all your carbon is. So if you kind of use the heat to the blue part of the flame, you'll get by with being able to use white shrink tubing and not turn it black. So we'll just kind of get in here nice and close. We'll tighten that guy up. Reason I started doing this method is I used to glue the wires down, but then I'd try to take the servo out and I'd mess my wires up on my servo. So now I just take like an X-Acto and just a small amount of CA, And we're just going to kind of put a little bit on the back of that shrink tubing. And then I'm going to take that, fold it over. We're going to hold it against the back of the servo. A lot of people's like, man, I really don't want to mess my servos up like that. Well, I'll show you another one I've done previously, and it's in pretty good shape. So then once that's on there, you know, it's a little cleaner, a little sleeker. You don't have this huge bird's nest of wires. So this one I had done in the past, and you can tell the back of the servo here, there's just smallest remnants of CA on there. Doesn't bother me that bad. If I really cared, I could probably take some acetone and clean that right off. But the point of this process is, if that was glued down and then I want to move this to another car, it's easy enough to pop the CA loose, pull the shrink tubing off. You may have to cut it. And now I'm back to full length wire. And then as you can see on my sprint car here, very similar, you know, full length wires. Everything's kind of tucked to the side of the receiver, is where I have them kind of slightly glued to the side of the receiver with that shrink tubing. Car's super clean, super easy to work on. Hope that helps, guys. Thanks.